Well, thanks for joining us here in Ottawa, Cole, for this important announcement. I'm sure a lot of our supporters across the country are curious to get to know you. You are one of our newer names amongst our lieutenants. I'm curious if you can just tell me a bit about yourself, a bit about your background.
Absolutely. Well, thanks, Daniel. It was a pleasure to be here with yourself and the members of the People's Party of Canada that do all the hard work behind the scenes to also do the press release with Maxime Bernier, our party leader, our fellow lieutenants that we've now put forward. So I'm really excited to get to work closely along with Kelly, Danielle, and Michelle in the future. And I hope this is something really positive for the PPC so we can start to really uh, disseminate our message and reach even more people. We've seen Max basically spearhead the PPC mainly by himself for the last since 2019. So I think having more people working with him and getting those people out there more, I think that's going to be beneficial for the party. And I think that's going to also show that Max is not alone. There's been a lot of talk lately, the small fringe minority and whatnot, and I think there's a lot more people that are starting to realize there's been something amiss in our country for quite a while. So I'm excited to get to work with all you guys to address some of those things and to continue spreading our message. I was born and raised in Six Nations. Now this is a First Nations community just outside of the city of Brantford in Brant County. So that's actually technically my riding where I ran in the 2021 election. So that was a real honor for me. I was born at the Brantford General Hospital, where I later worked. So I've been in the riding my whole life. I'm still living out on the reserve right now. And one of the questions I always got asked when I was speaking with two different reporters and stuff, they're like, how was your experience growing up on the reserve compared to anywhere else? And it's like, I don't know. How was your experience, Daniel? Like, it was really no different at all. Like, it's pretty much just like any other rural community. There's been a lot of talk too about First Nations people and water advisories. Well, if you're not within like a municipality or a township, odds are you're going to be paying to bring your water in. So when people are hyping up some of these issues within our First Nations communities, being someone that's been born and raised there, I can kind of, there are some legitimacies to them, and then others are just kind of glossed over and whatnot. So that's seeing to both sides of the coin there growing up. That's always been interesting. I think that's kind of definitely helped shape my worldview when dealing with not only issues with our First Nations people, but also Canadian political issues as well. I was paying attention to Maxime and the People's Party of Canada, and I'd also noticed at the beginning of the pandemic that Max tweeted something that one of his supporters sent him, and it was from a Canadian that immigrated from a communist country, lived through the type of authoritarianism we're starting to see glimpses of in our own country. And they were saying, like, I don't believe this is necessarily about a novel virus. I think there's a much bigger agenda being pushed through at the same time. And Max said something along the lines like, I too have that same fear. So I was really inspired and happy to see that Max was somebody in our political landscape in Canada who was not just going with the narrative. And he didn't stop there. He continued to travel across Canada and to rally with thousands and thousands of Canadians across our country at a time when the people needed it most. And like I said, this is a time when people, like after a year and a half of they weren't able to graduate, go out and visit with their friends. Some people weren't even able to have a funeral for their deceased family members, or loved one. Like, so it was a very trying time in our country for the last little bit. And to see Max out there just connecting with people and letting them know that they're not alone, they're not crazy, and there's actually a lot of people who are like-minded and are wanting to, I guess, band together to kind of figure out what the solution is. Like, we're in this situation, how are we going to get out of it? And especially during the 2021 election, with the platform Max and the PPC had presented, a very viable platform and a lot of concrete solutions to actually be able to get ourselves out of some of these messes that we're now finding ourselves in.
Unlike some of our other lieutenants who have been involved in the party for years now, you're relatively new to the party, Cole. I'm curious if you can explain to us how you got involved in the party over the last year.
Well, think it was about springtime. Like I said, I've been following the PPC's social media and different rallies and events that Max and his party was having. And I thought, I know we weren't sure if we are gonna have an election because we just finished the 2019 one. So I was like, I'd like to know who like our local candidates are and just try to find ways to be more involved or to support Max in the PPC. And I noticed that there was an open call for candidates that was sent out. So I was like, I think it would be a interesting opportunity just to go and put my name in for a candidacy. Like there was a background check and everything that you had to go through. I had never had a criminal record in my life at all, up until the last couple of years for protesting. But so I was like, I can pass this, no problem, I'm sure. And I was liking what Max and the PPC stood for. And I guess to put it simply, the four founding freedoms of the PPC: the freedom, fairness, responsibility, and respect. So, like I said, I put my name in. I, being a younger person in the community, somebody that wasn't too well known or nothing, I was like, I don't know what the chances are that I could be acclaimed as a candidate. But at that point, I said, if nobody else is going to go and step up to run, at least I'll know and feel a little better at the end of the day that there's at least one person running within my community that people can hopefully put their faith in and support and vote for in the election. We built a incredible team, a relatively short time frame, and I think we did fairly well for having such a grassroots campaign. And I've never ran for any type of political office before, so very, very inexperienced as they come. But like I said, I'm not in it for myself at all. I want to see good things being done in this country, and I want to see good people standing up to fight for our country.
In your new role with the party, you'll have a prominent voice to speak for the interests of Ontarians. I'm curious if there are any policies or issues that might be underserved by the traditional party.
One of the biggest concerns that I'm hearing is actually coming from our farmers and our agricultural sector in Ontario, which really does make up a relatively large portion of our economy in Ontario. And one of the things that was hitting them hard already over the last few years was the carbon taxes from Justin Trudeau's Liberal government. And if you've ever looked at a farm and seen all the heavy equipment that they have to operate and run just to be able to do their jobs, to put produce on our shelves, and even to transport that produce to our shelves, that's costing so much money in fuel. And when you're adding taxes to our fuel and you're raising the price, that's what happens when you add a tax to something. So they were already suffering from that. And now we see with the conflict going on between Russia and the Ukraine, we're seeing these sanctions being applied. And one of the things that's also hitting our farmers now is the sanctions for the fertilizers that our farmers need to be able to grow their crops and to keep them to be able to bring them to the market. So there's some very concerning reports about how the cost of food is going to arguably be skyrocketing in the near future. So that's something that's very concerning. And then we have the situation with our economy right now too. As I mentioned, we're $1 trillion in debt. There is no type of urgency to return to any sort of balanced budget. We're just continuing to spend. We're printing money that's not backed by anything. It's the fiat money. And what that's doing is raising our inflation. So now the money that we do have, it's worth less. And you can raise minimum wages and whatnot, but until you actually tackle the core issues instead of putting band-aids on them, you can be making $30 minimum wage, but the price of living and the cost of living is only going to go and be exacerbated that much more. So like I said, we have to be rational about these types of things and apply common sense solutions to them, and to lower the cost of living for Canadians. Because like I said, when our dollars are worth more and the price of living is only continuing to go up. So we're going to be reaching a tipping point at some point, and I think it's going to wake a lot more Canadians up when they realize that the cheese in the mousetrap, and you always see that parallel there, it's not free. There's always another catch to it.
Okay, so just to wrap things up, do you have a message to send to our supporters in Ontario and around the country?
Yeah, I guess to my fellow Canadians in our country, I just would want to tell them stay strong. You're not crazy. There's a lot of things going on in our country. I know a lot of people have lost a lot of faith in our government, our institutions such as our judicial system, and it's concerning because we're at a dangerous point where if too many people lose faith in our institutions and our government, our society, that's not a good place to be for any country. But one of the most important things you can do is continue to help us to spread our message at the People's Party of Canada and to help us break through those barriers. Because, like I said, we don't get the same coverage the other parties do in the mainstream media. And I said also earlier, we can hoot and holler as much as we want, but until we're actually electing uh, C- Canada First representatives to go into Parliament, provincial Parliament, and also in our municipal and even like our band council elections, we need to get people into these offices who love people more than they love power. The actions we do or the actions we don't do are going to have an impact on not only the future of Canada, but ultimately the future of the world.
Perfect. I think that's a great place to wrap things up. Thanks for joining us today, Cole.
Thank you, Daniel. Like all over the place there, but
No, no, it's great. It's great.